When I was told that this evening's festivities were to take place here in the Student Center Ballroom, I started reflecting on my own tenure at the university, trying to recall the first time I stepped foot into this room. In truth, I know I didn't spend a lot of time in this space. More often than not, I was actually over in the Kiva. As a member of the now sadly defunct International Film Society, we often screened films there in hope of introducing our fellow students to the works of Almodovar, Mironer, or, if I had my way, some strange late-night fare that I knew they were not going to program at the theater in town. Sometimes, like when we screened Dr. Strangelove, it was a rousing success. Others, like our Easter showing of Jesus Christ Vampire Hunter, not so much. Coincidentally, we did get protesters for that one, which I've always considered a badge of honor. It was certainly not the last time that my taste in film ruffled some feathers. But I digress. Upon further reflection, it should come as no surprise to me that the reason I first entered the ballroom was because of film, or rather, a filmmaker. Nearly 22 years ago, Kevin Smith, the famed director of Clerks, Mallrats, and Dogma, stopped here at Kent as part of a college lecture tour. It was a fairly big deal. He was taping the event for DVD because this was way before you could just upload it to YouTube. And for a film nerd like me, it was not to be missed. The idea that this person whose movies I obsessively rented as a teen, especially so because some of my teachers spoke ill of them, coming to where I lived seemed like a dream come true. He made films, and at the time, from my little dorm room in Apple Hall, that seemed unattainable. Also, as a brief aside, Apple Hall was torn down while I was still living here, so if you were wondering where that is, it's gone. Though, I'll always remember it as the place I showed a group of freshmen Evil Dead on VHS, causing a handful of sleepless nights. Like I said, ruffled feathers. I don't remember exactly all Kevin Smith talked about that night, but one thing I recall with absolute clarity is that he opened his speech talking about how surreal it was for someone like him, whose claim to fame was making stoner movies with his friends, was asked to come and speak at an institute of higher learning. He joked that he didn't feel like he should be imparting knowledge to anyone. I remember thinking that was absurd. By filming movies outside of a convenience store in New Jersey, he had made himself into an iconoclast. Maybe his jokes were dumb, but people paid for tickets to hear characters deliver them. In my mind, he had everything to say to us. And then, 2 decades and some change later, I got a call to come talk to all of you, to give a speech in honor of this momentous occasion of your commencement. And suddenly, I got exactly what he meant. When I received the message asking me to come here tonight, my immediate reaction was one of surprise. While flattering, I wondered if someone at my alma mater may have missed a few crucial details. Did they know that by and large my career was centered around horror movies? Were they aware that some of my most frequent collaborators were drag monsters whose idea of light humor started with hard R-rated material? Certainly they had missed the documentary where I referred to Freddy Krueger as a theater queen. But after I had a good laugh about the fact that Kent State invited someone who voiced a killer gnome in a low-budget splatter flick to come impart some bon mots, I started thinking about what I know now that I wish I knew when I was getting ready to leave this place for the adventures that would come. When I first entered this ballroom all those years ago, I viewed making movies or television as an unattainable goal. But now it's my job, and it's something I get to do in some capacity every day when we're not striking. And, as a matter of sheer coincidence, a TV special I recently worked on also happened to star one Mr. Kevin Smith. While we didn't actually cross paths on the production, it's an example that sometimes things that seem so far away can be a lot closer than you think. But I'm not going to tell you that it's easy. The aforementioned TV special was created and curated by 2 drag queen friends of mine who have built a fervent fan base the world over thanks in part to their very successful TV series. But when I was a student here at Kent State, the idea of a television show centered around drag artists, let alone multiple, was just something that didn't happen. In fact, not all that long ago, there wasn't an LGBTQ Center here at Kent at all. And while it's true that we did have a KSU Pride organization, their campus events were often sparsely attended, and on more than one occasion, they were threatened to shut down to frequent turnover of faculty advisors. Coming from a rural high school, college felt like a place where I could finally express myself. But I would be remiss if I said finding my voice didn't require navigating certain constraints. I always loved movies, But I'm sure part of the draw to the more avant-garde and strange fare was because I felt they were able to express through their runtime things I was not yet able. In truth, Kevin Smith was not making movies for me or speaking to the queer experience. In fact, by his own admission, he had a little bit of growing to do on that subject. But I was pulled toward his work at that time because he was a weirdo. And when you feel on the outside, you get weirdos. That's probably why I've always liked horror, because when done right, it can be the most powerful of genres. Not only can we use that lens of the fantastic to address things the mainstream may otherwise wish to ignore head-on, but by definition, it is a genre of subversion and otherness. And as queer people, we know a thing or two about being othered and treated as the subversive. It is the genre through which those besieged by the world's darkness can take back their power, or through which we can bring our very real fears and invest them into a runtime so that we may have the release or catharsis the real world does not always provide. When you think of a movie like Halloween, it's easy for the layperson to look at and assume the looming figure of Michael Myers is the other. But I posit that it's actually the character played by Jamie Lee Curtis, Laurie, who holds this distinction. Laurie is presented as someone on the outside looking in, yearning to be like everyone else. But when the night comes, it is the things that set her apart, her truest self, that allows her to survive. And to me, that's a queer story, because we have all been there. If you're here as an out queer person, merely owning who you are is an act of power. And surviving in the face of a scary world makes you stronger than they know. As queer people, we've all seen the boogeyman, but we need to remember that the boogeyman stays in the closet. We didn't. And we can kick its ass. And when you realize that you have that power, when the sequel comes around, as it inevitably does, you get to do what sequels are made for. You get to demand more. Everyone's journey is different, but I have no doubt that each of us, in our own way, knows what it means to fight for our place. And in asserting ourselves, I would be willing to bet that we also learned that it's okay to fight for more. Places like the LGBTQ Center here at Kent did not come into being overnight. Instead, they were built on the foundation of generations who not only fought to assert themselves and live their truth, but who knew that we deserve more than to merely exist. We deserve spaces and community and places where our experiences are not only recognized, but celebrated. In many cases, these extremely reasonable requests were met with no small measure of adversity. But what they don't know, and what they continue to fail to learn, is that for better or worse, we're used to adversity. And when the night comes, it's what sets us apart that makes us stronger than they could ever imagine. And it's for those reasons and many more that we get to be where we are tonight, celebrating in this fashion together, because those who came before not only fought, they fought for more. Now, I will fully concede that in the history of commencement-adjacent speeches, drawing life lesson analogies from John Carpenter's Halloween is probably fairly unique. But as I'm wrapping up, I hope you'll indulge me in one final anecdote about another equally unlikely keynote H word, Heclina. Some of you may be aware that one of my closest collaborators and friends is a legendary drag performer by the name of Peaches Christ, no relation to the vampire hunter. Over the decades, Peaches shared a storied, deep friendship and sisterhood with another iconic queen by the name of Heclina. And by virtue of our own interwoven webs, I also got to spend a significant amount of time in Heclina's company. As I'm sure many of you are aware from the news, Heclina tragically passed away about a month ago. And even as so many of us grappled with this information, almost immediately there was a flood of stories and reflections about the work she did in the world of nightlife, creating spaces for queer weirdos and somewhere to go for wayward souls looking for a place. Among all the bittersweet recollections, I had occasion to recall one of my own favorite evenings with Heclina. Though based in San Francisco, Heclina had been booked in Los Angeles to fill in as the host for a club event whose promoters were on the road. She reached out and let me know she was going to be in town and asked if I wanted to come see her MC. Naturally, I said yes. So used to seeing Heclina command a room with savage stage presence up in the Bay, I was shocked to discover that this particular Los Angeles crowd did not know quite what to make of their temporary mistress of ceremonies. Heclina's usual take-no-prisoners humor was going over like a lead balloon, and about 20 minutes into the evening, the air was thick with revolt. The audience was turning on her, and it was not subtle. And then Heclina did something that was so very Heclina. Knowing all too well the vibe of the room, I watched as this sensational drag monster planted herself on the stage, fixed a firm gaze on the audience, and gave them a look of utter defiance that seemed to say, "You don't want me here? Well, now I'm going to stay on the stage longer." And then she did a damn musical number that I'm fairly certain wasn't planned. It was ferocious, and it was punk rock, and it made me love her even more. And while I'm sure her brazen display of onstage rebellion won a few folks over, that wasn't the point. Heclina stood in front of a crowded room of people who weren't having it and dared to say, "This is me, deal with it." And look, we all want applause, we all want praise, but sometimes standing in your truth matters more than approval. It pains me to say on such a special night that there's still much work to do out there. Daily we hear news of anti-trans legislation, drag bans, don't say gay bills, and other monstrous agendas that seek to marginalize us and fetter our joy. The truth is that there are always monsters, but wickedness fears strength, and make no bones about it, you are strong. Not only is tonight about celebrating this chapter, but also a reminder to celebrate every step that brought you here, because you made a choice not just to survive, but to thrive, to fight, and to demand more. So all I ask is that you continue to do so, both for yourself and those who come after you who will look to your example. And sure, there will be people along the way who may not like it, and on those occasions, stand in your power and remember, this is me, deal with it. Thank you.